Refiere la Organización Internacional para las Migraciones, OIM, que en
The
2015,
International Organization for Migration referred that in 2015 there were 258 million of migrants in the whole world. This number means that this model that guarantees concentration of capital and extraction of raw material has caused migration for decades. This has been forced for a system that creates war, inequality, poverty, and forces people to translate from their own territory to another ones to offer their services as cheap labor. From this migration flow, big enterprises and networks are fed. 2 weeks ago, Honduran migrants started a tough caravan, and their government now says that they're going to do everything possible. Now the United States say they're going to do everything possible to prevent them to get into their country. They are the victims asking for help to their aggressor. The human rights organizations are doing anything. How is that the system allow free trade of their products but not the entrance to migrants? Today, the Migrant Caravan. While the caravan flees from violence, corruption, poverty, inequality, insecurity, and they try to continue their path towards the US, and considering that no human being is illegal, Juan Orlando Hernández, Honduran president, said that he will take care of this caravan so they can't pass the borders. In a paradox, hours ago, after saying that he will help the caravan, he said that he will prosecute the leaders of this caravan. I want to assure Honduran people that we have a work team to receive these migrants and a package of offers to give them opportunities depending on what each citizen want to do with its life in order to improve its life quality in their community. I also want to tell you, and I want to thank President Morales, after he told me that he was going to take care of this, and now we have a team coming to the northern part of Guatemala in the border with Mexico, a team for civil protection. That same airplane will be available to carry people back, to carry vulnerable people back to their own territory. They're offering jobs and things, but why don't they give back the money they stole from the agriculture ministry, or money for medicine, or money for education? How do they want people to return if they want to die? They'd rather die in the road than to work here and live in poverty in this country. This is fake. He only wants to wash his hands and to be friendly with other countries. We want to work, and it is obvious that if we wouldn't want to, we wouldn't be risking our lives to do this, to walk these roads. They don't care about the poor families of Honduras. They don't care about the poverty, the unemployment. Thousands of people are migrating now, have been humiliated in our country because we have no jobs, we have no food. I asked people to give us jobs. We're not going to be criminals. And those who are criminals, well, then they have all the right to return them to their country. Until October, the Mexican government received more than 1,600 requests to be refugees in Mexico. In the previous government, there were 1,028 requests. President Enrique Peña Nieto considered this as unprecedented. And he asked for ordered migration. As any sovereign country, Mexico won't allow and will never allow people to get into its country, into its territory in irregular ways. Violent attempts to get into Mexico is against our sovereignty and against even the very migrants, especially children and elder people. Our Foreign Affairs Ministry has orders to keep dialogue with the Caravan in order to maintain security. Another actor involved in this, President Donald Trump, he said that this Caravan is a band of criminals, that there are Middle Eastern criminals, and that he will cut economic help for Central American countries. He considered this as a national emergency, this Caravan, and he said that he will spread military troops to prevent this to continue. For those who are in the Caravan, go back. We won't let you get into our country. If you want to get into our country, please apply for the citizenship like millions of others are doing. The Washington Post said that they have thousands of soldiers in the border to prevent this to continue. Trump also said that he will approve an order to block the border between the US and Mexico in order to stop the migrants to get into the US, which are in a very dangerous quest. Additional to this, the digital website Infobae states that the Department of National Security of the US is tracking a new caravan that might be formed at El Salvador, and which will be headed towards the US on next October 31st. They are intervening communications, especially a group of WhatsApp in which the members are talking about whole families with children, little girls and boys, planning to move to the US. Our recommendation, Spanish magazine, mentions Pravat Patnaik, Marxist economist. The title is Migration as a Revelation Against Capital. It says, the matter is that apart from war and aggressions coming from capitalism and its regular modus operandi, they also work for dipping people into poverty and to trap them in their own universes, to keep them as cheap labor. They just allow migration to little regions that they want to use as cheap workers, no matter their conditions. Based on this, the modus operandi of capitalism needs this kind of procedure. That's the first paragraph of what Pravat says, this Indian Marxist economist. When migrants crossed the Suchiate River, which divides Guatemala and Mexico, how's the situation of them? They just did it. How's the situation now? Let's go with our special guest, Eduardo Martinez. Welcome, Eduardo. It's a pleasure to be here in this show of Guada Crítica. We are in Pijijiapa, in Chiapas, in the south of Mexico, where the migrant caravan has fulfilled its 8th day of staying here. Well, here the government said the first thing they did was blocking the border, and they prevented the people to freely migrate and to cross the border. They closed the Rodolfo Robles Bridge, and only a few people could get into the country, only those who did it by the legal way. However, we witnessed how people preferred to cross the Suchiate River in an irregular way, as the authorities say. That's why that area, the area of the river, was closed so more people could not cross. We've been following this caravan, we've been walking with them. They have found solidarity and help from Mexican people who offer them water, food, clothes. We have to say that they leave most of their property because it's very heavy. They get really tired and they are just walking. I can tell you that there is an energy here that of people that don't care about Donald Trump's threats. They will try, regardless of that, to cross the border and to get to the US. But that looks really difficult after the announcements of the US president of militarizing the border with Mexico. We still have to see that, and we still have to see how many people are going to be able to cross to the other side. We will go to Arriaga, a little town in which people are trying to find the best way to continue the road. We can see here how they stand in a row to be transported in vans, trying to avoid the sun, which is really tough. The temperatures have been really high. And this is what we can tell you by now. We can tell you that this caravan has around 3,000 or 4,000 people. Some other people have stayed, some of them have decided to return. Some of them decided to go to shelters offered by the Mexican people. But it turned out that those shelters were part of the anti-migration teams, and they have faced authorities and had to return to their countries. This will continue, and we know that more people will be coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, and also Honduras. Thank you, Eduardo, for this. He was in Pijijiapan. He was Eduardo Martinez from Chiapas. In Guatemala, Pablo Pérez Garcia connects with us now. He's going to tell us what happens there in that part of the border. Hello, Pablo. Good evening. We're here in the central plaza of Tecumuman in Guatemala, where during the last days and the last hours, so a few hundreds of people have arrived, and they're waiting to continue their path to the north, to the border with Mexico. We know now that some of them have been able to get to the country, but today only 30 and yesterday 40 people were able to get in to cross the border. But the migrants here are waiting for a critical mass to be formed. They know that friends from Guatemala, from Zacapa, from El Salvador are coming, so they're waiting for a big number of people to gather so they can convince the authorities in Mexico to let them cross the border. We have to tell you that they've been helped by the community of Tecunuman, and neighbor communities too. They've been doing cleaning tasks here. so they can find, so they leave things as they found them. Go back to you. Thank you to our correspondent Pablo Perez, also to Eduardo Perez, which give us info from these places. Who are the ones who take advantage of this caravan? Is it the United States? Who is it? We're gonna answer this after the break.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on culture, innovation, conservation, human well-being. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identities on By Gender. Cultural manifestations, they are in all its forms and the stories of real lives. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Sumo, el portal venezolano de investigación Misión
The
Verdad.
Venezuelan website called Misión Verdad shows this analysis. The title is The Strange Case of Venezuelan Migration. It's very important because they deeply analyze this case. So after what current capitalism has caused to be countries look for cheap labor, cheap employees, and Mexico and Colombia are part of this. A lot of Mexican people live abroad, but nobody talks about it. They talk about Mexico as the main migrant country in Latin America, and the second one in the world scale after India. These numbers only show that under the military pressure of the US, have caused free trade agreements with Mexico and Canada. We can analyze this to continue our analysis with our guests. What's going on in Honduras? So this phenomenon takes place. Let's look for some answers.
En Honduras, 65% de la población vive en condiciones de pobreza, lo que supone poco más de 5 millones de personas, y de estas, más de 3 millones sobreviven con apenas $2 diarios. Estos son datos aportados por el Foro Social de la Deuda Externa de Honduras, FOSDE, principal centro de pensamiento económico no estatal del país. El Banco Mundial no contradice los anteriores números y registra que Honduras tiene el promedio de pobreza extrema más alto de la región centroamericana, 60.9% de su población. En zonas rurales, 1 de cada 5 hondureños vive con menos de $1.90. El poder adquisitivo y condiciones de vida, el salario mínimo promedio equivale a $355, pero según el FOSDE, en el sector privado, 8 de cada 10 empleados gana por debajo del salario mínimo. Y en el sector público, 4 de cada 10.
In the public sector, 4 out of
tuvo la
10.
tasa más alta de desempleo en
In
la región, registrando
2016, Honduras had the highest rates
El
of
país presenta una reducción
unemployment
de la
in the region.
productividad en sectores como agricultura y construcción, reconocidas como principales fuentes de
Construction
empleo
and
para
agriculture
hondureños.
are the
Mientras la
main
inversión pública en infraestructura se
sources of
sitúa en el
employment in
mínimo.
Honduras,
La
but
crisis institucional también pesa.
people still live
La
in terrible
polémica
conditions even
político-electoral
working
de
there.
2017, que
The
culminó con el triunfo
political electoral
amañado de Juan
crisis
Orlando
in
Hernández, generó
2017
rechazo a la institucionalidad del
generated
país. Según un
rejection from
relevamiento hecho por la
people
Orden Católica Compañía de Jesús, presentado en
in
abril de este
Honduras.
año, 44.5% de los hondureños piensa
44.5%
irse
of
del
Hondurans
país motivado
can
a estos
think about
indicadores.
leaving the
Estos
country
no
after
pueden
these
divorciarse de una política
indicators.
extractivista aplicada por
This has been
corporaciones
caused by
transnacionales
an
mineras e
extractivist
hidroeléctricas, cuyos
policy
proyectos
from
generan
oil
desplazamientos
companies
de
and
miles de
electric
campesinos e
companies
indígenas de sus entornos habituales. Quien se
that
opone es criminalizado, perseguido y
rip-
asesinado. En lo que
displace
respecta a la
people from
seguridad, la
their
tasa de
indigenous
homicidios es de
communities.
43 por cada 100.000 habitantes. En 2013,
43 out of
San Pedro Sula fue
100,000
catalogada como
people
la ciudad más violenta
are
del
killed
mundo.
in
Y
Honduras,
es de allí de
and
donde
one
partió
of
la
its
caravana de
cities is
migrantes
one
el
of the
13 de
most
agosto de
violent cities in the
2018 con
world.
destino a Estados Unidos, a pesar de la dura política
They started
migratoria
a
diseñada
caravan
por Donald
towards
Trump.
towards the U.S. despite the policies applied by
Después de
Donald
estos
Trump.
datos de imágenes,
With
quiero
this info,
presentarles a nuestros
I
analistas
want to
para
show your
seguir
analysts
adentrándonos en esta jugada
to
complicada.
continue
Se trata de Andrés Molina, es periodista, defensor de derechos y libertad de
investigating
expresión.
and researching
Hace
this
parte
topic.
de Amigo de
We have
Latino
Andrés
de América
Molina,
Latina y el Caribe y enlaza con nosotros desde Capital
he's
Hondureña, Tegucigalpa. Y
at
Minor Berganza,
Tegucigalpa.
analista político y abogado.
And Minor
Bienvenida
Berganza,
para ambos y agradecimiento como siempre por
political
atendernos.
analyst.
Bueno, comienzo con Andrés,
Welcome
que
both of
está
you. I
en
start with
Honduras, en el
Andrés,
lugar
who is in
donde
Honduras,
se origina
the place
esta
where this
caravana que
caravan
copa varios
started.
titulares. Andrés, medios
Andrés,
como The Hill
media
y New
like
York Times abordan el
the
asunto
New York
diciendo
Times talk about this,
que la marcha es aprovechada
saying
por
that
la
this
Casa Blanca
march
para
is being used
intensificar
by
ese
the White
mensaje
House
antimigrante,
to
tratar de
intensify this
convencer al Congreso de que
anti-migrant
proporcione
message,
los fondos que
to
está
convince the
pidiendo Donald Trump,
Congress
25,000 millones
to
de
grant
dólares, para
Trump
construir el muro en la
the
frontera
funds
sur.
that
Al
he's
mismo
asking
tiempo,
to
hay
build
otros
the
que se hacen eco de
wall in the
acusaciones sin
border.
pruebas, como que habría
But there
terroristas
is other
infiltrados,
people that
que son las maras o que es una maniobra del presidente
allegate
venezolano
that there
Nicolás
are
Maduro. Yo le pregunto,
terrorists
Andrés,
from
¿dónde está el rigor a
Midwest,
la hora
Middle
de
East,
informar cuál es el tratamiento que se está haciendo
or criminals.
Honduras
So
adentro?
is this true? What's the treatment being
Sí,
done in
bueno,
Honduras?
muchas gracias por la invitación. La verdad es
Thank you
que
for the
sí, los
invitation.
medios de
The truth is
comunicación
that media,
corporativos ahora
corporate
mismo,
media,
incluso dentro de Honduras,
even
la cobertura
inside
mediática
Honduras,
es muy pobre, digamos,
is very poor.
en función del contenido y todas las
Their
implicaciones que
content and the
tiene esta
explanations they give
caravana migratoria que asuma
about
más
this
de 10,000
caravan,
personas,
which has
probablemente
more
puedan
than
dar rondando los 12,000 personas ya que van
12,000
camino a los
people
Estados
actually
Unidos de forma masiva.
moving towards the
Yo creo
US.
que el mayor problema acá
Well, I
es
think
que
that the
no se
biggest
está
problem
enfocando el
here
problema, la
is
causa
that
de la migración.
nobody's talking
No se
about
está
the cause of
enfocando la
migration.
problemática
Nobody's
que
talking
vive el
about the
hondureño, que
problem
es lo
of
que
the
obliga
Hondurans,
a estos hombres y
which
mujeres
forced them,
acompañados de sus
men and
hijos,
women and
a
children,
migrar y
to
abandonar lo que
migrate
tienen en
and
este
live
país.
whatever they
Yo creo
have in
que
their country.
no debe ser fácil
I
para
think that it's
ninguna
not easy
familia
for no
dejarlo
family
todo
to
tirado
leave
y buscar
everything
futuro en un
behind,
país
to
extraño,
look
un
for a
país
better
lejano,
future in another
donde el
country,
idioma
in a
incluso
foreign
puede ser una
country,
barrera para
in
el
which
desarrollo.
language could be
Lo que está
an
ocurriendo en
obstacle
este
to develop.
momento es que se está dejando
What's happening now is that
los elevados niveles de corrupción. Se está obviando que
they
Honduras
are ignoring the
incluso ya
high
superó a
levels of
Haití
corruption.
en niveles de
Honduras
pobreza y
overcame
los niveles de
Haiti
desocupación, pero sobre todo
in
hay
poverty
algo que nos
levels
abate acá y
and
es
unemployment
los
levels.
elevados índices de corrupción que
But I want
todavía
to
tenemos en el
talk
país.
about the
Se
high
está obviando
corruption
la
levels.
crisis política
Nobody
que
is
generó
talking about the
el
political
golpe de Estado
crisis
en julio de 2009. Se está
after
obviando las crisis
the
posteriores que se
2009
generaron
coup.
o pequeños golpes de
Nobody's
Estado
talking
que se
about the
han ido
little
generando en el
coup,
país
that
y que tienen
little
ahora
coups
como
that have been
resultado,
happening in
pues,
the
que
country,
nadie cree
and
en la institucionalidad.
which
La
have
pobreza se ha
caused a
incrementado,
lack of trust in the
la deuda,
institutions.
el compromiso de deuda, la adquisición de
Nobody's
deuda por
talking
parte del
about
gobierno de
the
Honduras
debt
de
of
golpe
the
estaba
Honduran
casi
government
aumentado de
after
5
the
mil
coup.
millones que había en
It
ese
increased
momento
from
a
5
una deuda
million,
de 15 mil
5,
millones de
5
dólares.
billion to
Entonces,
15
hay una
billion.
realidad que está obligando al hondureño y que va a
So the
continuar,
reality
que
of
no se está viendo por
Honduras
los medios de comunicación.
is not being shown
Que nos
in
lo
media.
digas tú, que estás
by
allí
media.
en Honduras y que justamente tienes
I
de
want you to
primera
tell
mano
us,
cifras que nosotros aportábamos antes, pero nada como que nos lo diga alguien desde el lugar de los hechos.
we had
Quiero
numbers, but
sumar a
nothing
Minor
like someone
Berganza,
who
desde
lives
Ciudad
in
de
the
Guatemala, recuerdo, que
source
se conecta
of
con
the
nosotros en esta
facts.
jugada crítica. Le pregunto, Minor,
Okay,
para
Minor,
ir
now we
también a
go
las
with
causas,
you.
un sistema que expolia, que despoja
this system that arrogates
que impone un sistema de
property, the wealth of the people, that creates inequality, that condemns migration,
pero entonces establece duras barreras.
but it also applies very strong barriers for the people who want to develop. Well, effectively, looking for the causes, it's very appropriate to find the solutions. Proposals of development coming from the affected social sectors, affected by the neoliberal and capitalist system, apart from the arrogation of public funds, they push people into inhuman conditions. In the case of Guatemala, the Guatemalan people with almost no resources, they went to the streets to give the little they have to share with the caravan. This is a very strong bloc of people that keeps looking for different places to cross the border, different solutions to do this. This border goes from the Pacific coast to the coast with Belize, and these Honduran people have looking for all the possible ways to cross this border. It's not exaggerated to say that there are 11,000 or 12,000 Honduran moving in different blocks to the border. Well, the causes of this are in a very corrupt system, economic and political system, which not help people, which force people to look for better conditions outside their country. This on one hand. On the other hand, it's not exact to say that it's exact to say that the U.S. government are attacking and blackmailing people in Central America. They are taking advantage of this to make the Congress to grant Trump the funds to build the wall. Trump is using these anti-migrant policies to get those funds. So, according to you, this has to do with the electoral political crisis. Is Trump trying to continue these policies? Well, there is no doubt about it. As we can see, President Trump has not only continued his pressure against migrants, but has also taken advantage of these situations, these painful situations of poor people, to use this as an excuse to get the funds to build the wall. Let me tell you something. It's not only the money to build the wall, it's the money to create mobilizations in the border to attack the migrants. Not only, and this is not because there is a real risk, because there are no proof that there are terrorists in this group, but only to fulfill his promise, with which he got the votes. Thank you, Minor. Don't go away. We still have some questions for you, but I want to go back with Andrés in Tegucigalpa to ask him, hey Andrés, Juan Orlando Hernández said that he sent a delegation to Washington to organize an international force. He also said that those who accept voluntary return to their country will have a healthcare plan. And he also said that he's ready to prosecute the leaders of the caravan, and he never recognizes the reality of this Central American country.
Sí, es que realmente el problema del
Well,
gobierno
the real
acá es que
problem of
el
the
gobierno
government
nadie le
here is
cree.
that
El
nobody
gobierno
believes
está tan
in it.
desprestigiado y tan
It has no
carente
credibility.
de credibilidad que ni los mismos grupos de poder creo le
Not
están
even the
creyendo
power
ahora, que
groups
seguramente ni
believe
los
in
mismos
it.
Estados Unidos están confiando en el gobierno de Juan Orlando
The United
Hernández, a
States are
pesar de que fueron
trusting
ellos
Juan
quienes
Orlando Hernandez
lo sostienen,
despite
quienes lo impusieron y quienes lo han
their
legitimado en el poder
actions
ante la comunidad internacional. Yo creo que el problema acá es que, en
against
efecto,
him.
las condiciones
Actually, the
son
problem here is that
provocadas más
these
bien por el
conditions
gobierno, las
have been
condiciones
caused
para que
by the
la gente migre,
government
para que la
for
gente tenga
people
que
to
salir del país
migrate,
a
to leave
buscar
the
en otro
country,
lugar
to
un
look for a
espacio
better
donde poder
future
vivir,
somewhere
donde
else,
poder
to look for a
asegurar
new
el derecho a la
home,
alimentación,
to look
asegurar
for
el derecho a una
food,
vivienda digna,
to
asegurar el
enforce
derecho al
their
trabajo.
rights
Es el mismo gobierno
for of job, of
precisamente el que es el
work, of
responsable.
feeding,
Sobre
of
la
clothing.
cantidad de recursos que ha dicho que se va a invertir,
The
pues es
amount
que
of
no se ven los
resources that
recursos.
they
Realmente,
want to
¿dónde
invest,
están esos
well,
recursos? ¿Hay un
they don't
presupuesto
exist.
elevado?
There is no
Lo que sí se
budget for
puede ver es
this.
que ha habido una
What we
excesiva
can see is that
militarización del
there
país,
is an
que la
excessive
pobreza ha
militarization
aumentado
in
y
the
eso sí es
country,
real, eso se puede
and
ver.
that's real. We
Sí
can see that.
se puede ver claramente en los rostros
You
de
can
las
clearly
personas que
see
van
that the
migrando, los que van
people
viajando.
that are
Todos tienen una
traveling,
característica importante. La mayoría son jóvenes, son hombres
they're
y mujeres
scared, and
jóvenes
most of them are
y
young,
además marcados por la
young
pobreza. Son
people who
gente
live in
que no
poverty.
llevan nada, no tienen
They
nada
have
quizás al llegar
nothing,
acá más que su tierra, su familia, pero bienes
probably
materiales no tiene
some
absolutamente
lands in their
nada que los
family, but
pueda
nothing else. They have nothing
tener un
else
arraigo en el país más
that
sostenido
can
que puedan decir,
hold them
me
to
quedo a
in
luchar
their
acá,
country,
sino que
that
son
can make
personas
them
en
stay and
extremo
fight for their
pobres,
country.
gente
They
que
live in extreme
perdió la
poverty. They
esperanza
have
de poder
nothing.
salir
They have lost
adelante en
their
su
hope
país y
of
cuando Juan
even
Orlando
their
dice que van
situation.
a invertir esta
When
cantidad de
Juan
recursos,
Orlando
uno
says
se
that
pregunta por qué no se
the
han
government is
invertido
going to
antes,
invest
dónde está
all these
entonces toda
resources,
esa
then
cantidad de
you can
dinero
ask why
que dicen
haven't
que
that
tienen para
happened
invertir
before?
si no se ha visto. Lo que se ha
Like,
visto más bien es
we
al
have
contrario,
seen that
extremo militarización y
opposite to
gasto
this,
elevado
they
en
have spent
armas
their
y
money
esto
in
es enriquecido
militarization and
efectivamente
buying
porque
weapons.
las empresas que antes eran públicas hoy son privadas. El
Companies
recibo
that
de
were public
el
now
que
are
antes venía por
private.
100 lempiras hoy viene por 200. Por decir un ejemplo, es decir,
For
aquí
example,
lo que se ha aumentado es la pobreza, lo que se ha
here,
aumentado es
what
la
has increased is
desesperanza y
poverty,
una
is
institucionalidad
lack
que
of
no
hope.
existe. Realmente ese es el
There
grave
are
problema,
no
creo yo, que
institutions,
tenemos ahora mismo en
no
el
strong
país
institutions, and
y
now in this
que claro
country,
está, pues
it is
hay
clear
amplios sectores de la sociedad
there are
que no
wide
reconocen este
sectors of
gobierno y
society
que exigen la convocatoria de una
that
asamblea
ask
nacional
for a
constituyente
national
para
assembly
restablecer el orden
to
constitucional que se rompió en
restore
junio de 2009
the
y que
order that
permanece
was
siendo
broken
nuestro
in
recurso.
2009, July.
Inexistente, identificas,
Inexistent
Andrés, entre las
institutionality.
causas que dan origen a esta situación, a este fenómeno. Quiero
Part of the
volver con
causes
Minor
that
Berganza,
created this
desde Ciudad de
conflict.
Guatemala, para preguntarle
Back
también
to you,
sobre
Minor.
la
I want to
migración
ask
como
you,
generadora
is
de las
migration
llamadas remesas, de ese dinero
a
líquido para los
generator
familiares que se quedan en casa, ¿no? Que definitivamente aumenta balanza de pagos,
does this
engrosa los
cost money
productos
for the
internos
families that
brutos de
stay
las
home?
respectivas
Is
naciones,
this really good for
descomprime las
them?
tensiones que generan pobreza y desempleo, pero ¿cuánto tiempo más se puede sostener eso? Es decir,
And for how long can
¿se
that be
resolverá
held?
realmente la situación si no se
Held.
ataca directamente a las causas que ya hemos identificado? O sea, la cuestión pasa por un cambio de modelo, de sistema.
This needs a change of system.
Efectivamente, las remesas juegan el papel de
Well, the money that
salvamento.
they
Sin
send
las
to the
remesas,
families that
estos
stay home,
estados
well, that's
simplemente no,
kind
o
of
sea,
like a
estarían más
salvation measure.
Las remesas han jugado ese papel.
This
y las
money has
migraciones,
been very
y este flujo
important for the
permanente va
locals,
incrementando esas remesas. A los grupos de poder, a la oligarquía
the power
que es
groups
propietaria de todo el sistema financiero de nuestros
that
países del
own
Triángulo Norte,
most of
cae
our
como un
finance
bombón.
system.
Es dulce, es un
They're very
bocado
happy with
que
this
se
because
cae
the people
porque
are working to get money
usa
into the
esos
country and they are
recursos que
doing
vienen vía
nothing.
las
The
remesas
finance system are
para
using this
procesos
money
especulativos
to
de
speculate,
préstamos y
to
de
use it
uso
for
del
loans,
sistema
to
para su
use it
propio beneficio.
for its own
Ahora bien,
benefit.
eso, por supuesto,
But
ha
now,
estado
of
paliando la
course,
situación del hambre, de las necesidades, como efectivamente
this
lo
has
has
put the
manifestado.
situation of
Sin
poverty and
embargo,
hunger as
existe
an
también
advantage.
la necesidad
There is also
de
the
que
need
para evitar que grandes movilizaciones de masas
to
que
prevent big
provoquen
masses
estas
of
crisis
people
humanitarias, los programas de desarrollo de
to enter
solidaridad en
into
nuestros
humanitarian
países ya
crisis.
no se pueden seguir obviando.
We
Ya no
cannot
se puede
ignore
dejar de seguir implementando. Ya no podemos seguir
that we
esa
need
ruta neoliberal de
new
las
development
privatizaciones,
ways
de las
apart from the
empresas
neoliberal
públicas
ones.
o de las actividades públicas para el desarrollo.
We can not
Necesitamos
only trust in public
generar en la
activities,
propuesta política
to hold our economy. We need to give people the idea of working for a new nation, pluricultural, because that's what we are. We need to strengthen our own inner resources and companies. And we need people to develop new economic sources, new economic, so they can fund their housing, their clothing, their food, their education, their health. The lack of opportunities have caused this, and also the capitalist system. This has affected the labor system. Thank you to both of you for being here with us in our show. Those were our guests. We're talking about criminalization that must be done against those who create this kind of situation. Now we ask, why are the victims asking for help to their aggressors? Is that, or is the people asking their aggressors to compensate them, to solve the crimes they have caused? We'll continue with this in our next blog. Don't leave. Stay with us.
Me gustaría tener un mundo mucho más inclusivo para todos.
没有贫穷.
Στην ανθρωπότητα θα ήθελα να δω παραπάνω αγάπη, αγνότητα, πολιτισμό και επαφή με τη φύση.
Que el ser humano despierte su conciencia.
I want humanity to see itself as one humanity.
We are the people, a space, a voice. We are Telesur without borders.
Migrant caravan in Central America. How has the governments of Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala answered? Referring to Honduras, the first reaction of President Juan Orlando Hernández was an announcement of sending buses for migrants to return to Honduras. However, after an interview with the president of Guatemala, Jimmy Morales, they stated that migrants are used for political interest. There are people used. They think that people are being used by political interest to violate the borders. Enrique Peña Nieto considered this as controversial, and he said that they won't allow the access to people irregularly or violently. Mexican authorities prevent them to cross the border with tear gas and violence. Donald Trump, president of the US, gave a firm speech against migrants, and he threatened with cutting economical support for countries like El Salvador or Guatemala. US President also criticized the migration policies applied by the Democratic Party. Mike Pompeo, US Secretary of State, asked Mexico to close its borders. The Pentagon announced that they will militarize the border with Mexico with around 8,000 military members. Now, with our critical move of today, we're here with Reinaldo. He was the president of the investigation institution about Africa. Welcome to Jugada Crítica, to Critical Move. First, the moves, the people who reject this migration caravan, and which are actually the ones that created this situation. They forced millions of people to move from one continent to another, as it happened with Spain and Africa in the past. Are they using these countries, these people, as slaves, as cheap labor? Well, this is the same case. Because these countries needed cheap workers. It happened also in Latin America and South America. It happened in Spain when they brought Africa, when they took African people as slaves. Theoretically, after the Second World War, the UN was created, also the Conference of UN for Commerce and Development. There was a movement of the southern countries in 1977, and in this conference they achieved to get help for development, which was 0.7% of the GDP of the main 22 countries of the world, in Europe, United States, Japan, etc. They achieved this. Why? To help the poverty created by colonization, by a lack of capital in the southern countries. And this fund was supposed to help investments for agriculture, industry, and different other areas of the country. That didn't happen. People continued to develop, especially the powerful countries. And other countries keep lowering the prices of their raw materials. Today, the development aid is not higher than $70 billion each year. The official one should be around $140 billion, but there is only 70 billion, which is like the budget of a country like Venezuela, for example. We're talking about 170 countries which have... Well, how can you help people? How can you fight poverty with such a low budget? While these countries keep reducing the price on their raw material. So the exploitation process continues. Yeah, it continues. These countries, the poor countries, are seen as cheap sources of labor. It would be important to invest in education, to get professionals, to get people prepared to work. Most of these prepared people are taken by northern countries that haven't invested in this. What is Peña Nieto talking about when he mentions controlled migration? Well, migration has always existed, but now migration as a crisis, or migration as a threat for the northern countries. I'm going to talk about migrationism, because these countries have changed their rules. To fight communism, to fight trends as communism used to be. So what they did, they used to manipulate communist people to move them against their own home places. Then after this they used the speech of terrorism, and that's how Bush won the elections, and that's how Obama won the elections. And in 2017 Trump came. So what are we afraid of? Trump thought. Well, he said, let's be afraid of the people who came into our country, in this case the United States, that can take your jobs, that can kill you. So we have to vote against them. So he used this speech and he won the elections. Migration as a fear. Yeah, that's migrationism. That's what I'm talking about. It's the same as terrorism or the fear against communism. They consider Venezuelan people as dangerous, but there are double standards here. For example, the people who migrate to Europe were considered as dangerous. But I go beyond this, Lucia. In Europe, they have left African migrants to die. The Mediterranean is a big grave. That's how they consider it. And that happens every day. That's why it's considered that way. In this case, Turkey is like a middle ground for migrants. And Morocco and Libya are countries that are blocked for migrants. Have an hypothesis? I think that the United States is playing with this situation. They're creating people, fearing the people who are going to vote in these elections that will happen in November. So he's using this to create fear to get voters, to tell them, hey, these migrants are coming, how can we stop them? You have to give us your vote. This is beneficial for Trump. That's why they talk about the exodus of Venezuela.
Están creando ese miedo. Curioso que el término que se emplea es caravana, que bien alude a festividad, carnavalesco.
It is funny that they are using the term caravan, which is also a happy word, a jolly word. But they never talk about the sadness and the pain that the migrants are living while crossing the borders, the rivers. They have to cross Mexico, which is a very big country, and which is not open to help. So what's going to happen with the migrants that get to the border with the U.S.? We have to see. Probably it's going to be a month or two more to get there. We have to see how the U.S. authorities put this in favor of Trump, turn this into something beneficial for Trump. We cannot think that Trump is acting because he's crazy or because he's an extremist. He is an extremist. But he's on top of this speech to persuade the world right wing. It is a game, a political game that gathers negative feelings against other human beings. They're creating dangers and fears where they don't exist. I think that the U.S. is playing a new doctrine based on fear to make people be afraid of what could happen, as Bush did when he was re-elected in 2004. I go back to the double standards held by the states. Let's talk about it. Well, the United States keeps this kind of good relation with Cuba, but one of the main migrant countries that have sent people to the United States is Haiti. They don't talk about Haiti. If we see the case of Cuba, there have been agreements when there was that big wave of migration in the end of the 90s, when Fidel said, okay, let the Cubans go. Guantánamo was filled with Cubans. So the US had to talk with Cuba to develop migration agreements. But with Mexican, with Guatemalans, with Hondurans, with all of them, there won't be any kind of negotiation. Mexico is pressured from both sides, from Latin America and from the US, right? And they have been really weak, their actions have been really weak. Well, the Mexican foreign minister said that they won't accept pressure, but it is obvious that they are just trying to end this period, to wash their hands. So we can see a kind of weakness here, but it's gonna come the time when he has to take sides. Mexico is one of the most important countries in terms of migration towards the US. Actually, that's one of the reasons for which Trump wanted to build a wall. The US said that he was going to cut the economic help for some countries like El Salvador or Guatemala. But only 0.21% of its budget is used to help this country. So, yeah, this talk shows us how they despise Latin America, how they see us as their backyard. And they say now, we won't help you if you don't say whatever I tell you to do. Now there are this president saying that those who come back will have jobs and everything, but that's not true. That's going to be just a political move in order to ease things, to calm things down. So Trump probably could negotiate with people in order to get their own. Trump might negotiate with these countries in order to make them return their people. But if it doesn't work, they will violate human rights. But also, if this happens, there will be voices that will talk about violation of human rights, like when the kids were separated from their families in the border. Do you remember that? Some migrants will be selected to get into the U.S. And look at this. The government of Mexico said, if you want to get in here, please regulate your documents, your papers. President Hernández in Honduras said, if you come back to Honduras, we will give you work. After capitalism and neoliberalism established the system of exploiting cheap workers in the smallest countries, what does it mean? Well, the resources, the natural resources, are property of all of us. 80% of the natural resources belong to the South. We should be able to. We have the right to use these resources as we want, as our peoples need. So this arrogation of resources cannot continue. This forces our people to migrate towards the countries that have arrogated our natural resources. The migration towards the U.S. is a result of our big territory, Latin American territory. It's a result of Latin America being stolen from the U.S., by the U.S. Natural resources should be used by its owners, by Africans, by Venezuelans, by Latin Americans, by Central Americans. Thank you very much, Reynaldo, for your analysis. Something that we didn't say, the numbers said by Juan Orlando Hernandez to help these migrants in case they accept a return is $27 million. We go to conclusions. The same governments that have been responsible for migration, that have created inequality in their own countries, they are finding a response in this caravan from the people that have been exploited. While the living conditions don't change and injustice continue, and fear and danger that the migrants represent will only be consequences of the exploitation of capitalism and neoliberalism. Migrant Caravan. This is how we end our show today. Thank you for being with us, and we'll be back in the next show.